Hi, this is Emerald and welcome to the Diamond Net, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to integrate the anima and the animus. Alright, so in today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about how to integrate the anima and the animus. Now first, I want to tell you a little bit about what the anima and the animus is in the first place. So the anima and the animus are a certain component of the Jungian psychological model. So this is started by Carl Jung, who is a Swiss psychologist, and basically he came up with the idea of the shadow, and basically there's a whole model that he has that has the persona, which has to do with the social mask that we wear, our ego, which is kind of the center point of what we consider to be ourselves. We have our shadow, which are all of our repressed parts. Then we have the self, which is kind of this nebulous sort of unitive consciousness that exists underneath and like within all of the other aspects of the model of the psyche. And then we have the anima and the animus, which is the inner opposite. And so Jung deemed this to be the inner woman in every man and the inner man in every woman, you know, consisting of all of the masculine traits that women have not integrated and the feminine traits that men have not integrated. And when it comes to the anima and the animus, the idea is that you need to integrate the anima and the animus to actually experience that unitive consciousness called the self. Now, one thing that I've experienced, which makes me think about the anima and the animus in a little bit less of like a binary kind of way, is because I have had issues with repressing my own feminine side, which has actually gotten in the way of my connection to self in the past. And so I like to tend to think about the anima and the animus as being able to hold space for the wholeness, to hold space for both the masculine and the feminine side at once. And so because this is the way that I tend to approach things, I will share things from that perspective. Now, before I get any deeper into the video, I want to be clear about what I mean by masculine and feminine and what I don't mean. So what I don't mean by masculine and feminine is just man-likeness and woman-likeness, and I also don't mean sort of gender norms within the general society. Sometimes gender norms can cross over these like archetypal masculine and feminine dynamics, but sometimes they don't. And so I tend to use more of an archetypal and energetic lens when I think about the masculine and feminine, because the masculine and feminine is in all things, including yourself. And so if we think about the masculine and feminine as like yin and yang, it's these two polar energies that are in all things. And ultimately, whenever there are things that are more yin across different cultures, what you'll find is that common symbols and common themes will emerge relative to the yin energy and the yang energy, or relative to the feminine and the masculine. So, for example, you will find across cultures that there is an association between the material world and the feminine. So even the word matter and mother, you know, those relate back to a feminine root word. So material, maternal, matrix, mother, matter, all of those relate. And so this is why when we think about the earth, we think about the earth being a mother. We call the earth Mother Earth. You'll also find that the sky tends to be associated with the masculine, and oftentimes sky deities can tend to be male god figures rather than female goddess figures. Now, there are exceptions to these rules, and we're looking at the general patterns within the human collective consciousness across different cultures and eras. And that's the way we kind of look at those archetypes, as sort of common blueprints and skeletons of meaning that can be found across different eras and different cultures. And so when it comes to looking at the masculine and feminine from these points of view, it's less so about what we consider man-like or woman-like in our current society, but things that are associated with the masculine and feminine more generally across a variety of different societies. Now, in terms of the benefits of integrating the anima or the animus, or you might call it the feminine side and the masculine side, is that you're able to have more of a wholeness within yourself, and you're able to basically come out of opposition to parts of yourself that are necessary in order for you to connect with that deeper unitive consciousness of self. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the benefits of integrating both the anima and the animus. All right, so in terms of the value of integrating the anima, Getting in touch with the anima is specifically meant to bring you in touch with the unconscious mysteries. So it gets you in touch with the unconscious mind. So it's almost like going into the formless and being able to have sensitivity and to gain touch with that. And so you can find the unconscious, of course, in the unconscious mind. You can also relate to sensory experiences this way and also emotional experiences this way, where it's not something that has words to it. It's not something that's very clear, it's very mysterious, but in getting in touch with it, you can then potentially, be able to apply the masculine side to it, which actually creates form from the formlessness. And that brings us into the value of integrating the animus. The integration of the animus enables us to actually bring form to formlessness. It enables us to put words to things that are otherwise mysterious and abstract and not comprehensible from the perspective of the intellect. So if we think about it this way, if getting in touch with the anima is like being in touch with the unconscious, being in touch with the animus enables us to tune into the unconscious and to create sense from the irrational dynamics that are happening in the unconscious, and to be able to produce insights and clarity, and to be able to get your conscious mind on board with the movements of the unconscious mind. So getting in touch with the anima is a little bit like stepping into the ocean, and getting in touch with the animus is like learning how to surf. Now, to give a common archetypal representation of the relationship between the anima and the animus, think of the story of Sleeping Beauty, where the sleeping princess represents the anima and the prince represents the animus. And so if we think about it, Sleeping Beauty is there in this castle fortress, and there's all sorts of different obstacles that the prince needs to get through to get to the sleeping princess. And then when he finds the sleeping princess, he kisses the sleeping princess and she wakes up. So if we think about the sleeping princess as the waiting potential of the unconscious mind, or the formless wisdom that has yet to be made form, when the prince kisses her with the insight that the animus is capable of and the ability for crystallization that the animus is capable of, what happens is that what was once formless, unconscious, now becomes something that the conscious mind actually can create clarity from and can create understanding from. And so within the story of Sleeping Beauty, the prince kissing the sleeping princess is actually a sort of symbol for how we as the conscious mind can actually go into the unconscious mind and create sense from nonsense, and to be able to sort of wake up that wisdom that's in ourselves, that's already there, but that we haven't actually made sense of yet. Now, in terms of the representations of the anima and the animus, when Jung talked about integrating the anima and the animus, the final stage of anima and animus integration are respectively Sophia and Hermes. And so Sophia is the representation of the mature anima, where it is like basically Sophia is the goddess of wisdom. And I like to think about Sophia as almost like this big well of wisdom that has not yet been crystallized, hasn't yet been turned to ice, isn't graspable, but is something that when you're in touch with it, there is an automatic like intuition and a knowing about it, even if your conscious mind hasn't fully come online to what that wisdom is and hasn't been able to crystallize it yet. Now, with Hermes, Hermes is a messenger god, and is messenger of the gods in general. And so he has a lot to do with communication and sending messages. And so when we integrate the animus, what we're doing is we're taking that water, that sort of well of wisdom that sort of like represents Sophia, and we're crystallizing that and we're turning it into ice. Because if you try to grasp water, water goes right through your fingers. If you hold on to ice, then you can actually like hold on to it. And this symbol of crystallization is what's necessary to be able to understand things from the perspective of the conscious mind. And so if we think about the Sleeping Beauty story, we could think of the sleeping princess as Sophia, and we could think about Hermes as being the prince that comes and kisses Sophia and wakes her up. And then through that dynamic, through that union, we can actually get the communication of a deeper wisdom. And that's communication in the sense of we can understand it with our own intellect, but we can also communicate it to others in a way that they can understand, and to help them put outwards to their own formless unconscious wisdom. So integrating the anima is about entering and immersing yourself in the mystery, and then integrating the animus is like turning the light on and being able to make sense of that mystery. All right, so just really quick, I wanted to mention that I have a brand new group coaching program called Shadow Work for Self-Sabotage. It's for ambitious people who want to learn how to use shadow work to get rid of blocks to motivation and procrastination and other forms of self-sabotage that hold them back from achieving their goals. And so if that sounds like something that you think you might be interested in, it's right now in its pre-enrollment phase and will be until July 20th. And there's a 10% discount that you can get if you enroll before then. So go ahead, if you're interested, go ahead and click the link down below in the description box to schedule a discovery call with me to see if the program is the right fit for you. All right, so really quick, I'm going to go into some signs that you might have a non-integrated relationship with your anima or your animus. So what happens when you've repressed the anima or the animus and you're not integrated with them is you will tend to lose the positive qualities associated with the anima or the animus, and you'll also get an overabundance of the negative qualities associated with the anima or the animus. So let's say if you have a repressed anima, one of the elements of the anima is to be in touch with your emotions. And so let's say that you have a lack of that positive quality. So you might lack emotional intelligence or lack emotional sensitivity, or you might have difficulty connecting with others because you're lacking that positive anima quality. However, if you have repressed your anima, you can also get a possessing relationship with the anima, where maybe the more negative elements of being in touch with the emotions might come through, where you might find yourself, let's say, being emotionally overwhelmed easily or emotionally fragile. And that's the way it tends to happen when you don't have your anima or your animus integrated, is that you will get a lack of the positive qualities, but the negative qualities will come in and sort of possess you, and you'll get an overabundance of those negative qualities. And so with both the anima and the animus, I'm going to go through some signs of what it looks like when your anima or animus is repressed, and also when your anima or animus is possessing. So if you have a repressed anima and you're lacking the positive qualities of the anima, you will tend to lack connection with your body, your emotions, and your instincts, and you'll also lack connection with the unconscious mind. You'll also tend to, because of this disconnection from the body and the unconscious mind, you'll lack a kind of intuitive awareness, and you'll lose the ability for insight and for nuance. You also might experience a sense of rigidity or contraction of your mind and a difficulty socializing with others. Now, if you have a repressed relationship with your anima and you have a possessing relationship with it, where there's an overabundance of the negative qualities of the anima, you could be dealing with emotional overwhelm, the tendency to emotionally manipulate others, spite. You might also experience emotional volatility and a tendency to lose connection with your boundaries. All right, now when it comes to having a repressed animus, meaning that you are lacking the positive qualities of the animus, you can lack the ability for discernment and decisiveness. You can find yourself struggling with vagueness and a difficulty articulating yourself, and also with a difficulty being assertive. You might also have a tendency to get caught up in groupthink and with a lack of individuation, a lack of your sense of a separate self. You can also find yourself directionless, flaky, and lacking in discipline. Now, if you have a repressed relationship with your animus and it's coming through in a more possessing way, where you have an overabundance of the negative elements of the animus, you might find yourself being walled off and domineering. You might have a tendency to overwork and to never accept help with that work. You can also end up really up inside of your head and disconnected from all the rest of reality and the embodied experience of reality. And you can end up isolating yourself from connection with other people and ending up even with an antagonistic relation to your body or an antagonistic relationship with your unconscious mind. All right, so those are some signs that you might have a repressed anima or animus. So now I'm going to give some suggestions for how you can integrate your feminine side or your anima or your masculine side or your animus. All right, so in terms of my recommendations for integrating the animus, the first thing is anything that's going to get you more in touch with your unconscious mind. So that could be shadow work in general, dream work, synchronicity work, active imagination, basically any type of inner work process, inner child work, anything that's like that. You can also use anything that's going to get you in touch with your body, your instincts, or with nature in general. So that means practicing tuning into your sensory experiences and your felt feelings of your hunger cues and your thirst cues and other types of instincts, really getting to know your body. Also, really grounding and realizing your connection with Earth and your place in nature in general. And a big part of getting in touch with the body and the instincts is to be able to accept your finiteness and your limitations and your mortality, and to accept that you will one day die. To know that, you don't go on forever, your power doesn't go on forever, and to really come to a place of deep acceptance of that. Then also working to avoid getting too caught up in your own mind and really being able to sink down into the experience of the material 3D reality, and to be able to just be with your five senses as opposed to living through the lens of the mind all the time. In order to get in touch with the animus, you can also try anything that's going to get you more in touch with your feelings and your emotions. So this is another way that we can get in touch with our body, because our feelings and emotions come up on the level of the body. And so we can use our emotions more as a navigational tool, and to be able to even use, let's say, emotional regulation, nervous system regulation practices. We can also do somatic work. We can also work towards just practicing sensitizing ourselves and feeling our emotions more deeply. This is one way that we can interact with a non-intellectual, non-rational mystery. And eventually when we apply, let's say, the animus or the masculine side to it, we can create clarity from that. But a big part of it is just being able to sit with those feelings in general. All right, so here are some recommendations that I have when it comes to integrating the animus. So the animus, the main thing is to practice articulating, and to do so often, and to try to articulate things in words as often as you possibly can. You can also experiment with expression through other forms of media as well, like music and through art. But you want to especially get really good at spoken word, or crystallizing things into very easily accessible and easy to understand insights. So you want to be able to interact with the mysteries and interact with your emotions, and you want to be able to very precisely talk about it. And so I recommend practicing this often. So one thing that you can do is you can practice journaling or writing on forums where people talk about their inner experiences a lot. Or you can even do what I'm doing now, and you can make videos where you describe what your internal experiences are, or you describe, some element of the mystery, and you really practice trying to get very precise with the language that you use, so such that it's easier for you to understand from the perspective of your intellect, but you can also help other people understand as well. You can also have deep conversations with others where you really try to convey your internal experience, your experience of your unconscious mind, or your experience of your emotions, or your experiences of your connection to nature, or even just things that you observe and take in from the external world. You can then practice putting words and symbols to that in such a way that other people and yourself can understand. Or you can do something that I've always liked to do. I like to kind of pace around and talk to myself, and I always imagine that I have some kind of audience there, and I'm explaining, interesting concepts or things about what's going on in my inner world, or, trying to create clarity from a mystery and to see how well I can articulate that. So these are just kind of practices that I do to kind of sharpen my sword in terms of the animus. But in a nutshell, the main things that you want to do when it comes to integrating the anima is to be able to interface more with your sensory experiences, as well as any type of non-intellectual, non-rational, non-thought-based experiences that you have, which again come to you through your five senses. So that can be your experience of your emotions, or any kind of sensory feelings in the body, things that you're taking in from the environment visually, you know, in an auditory way. And so it's really focusing on those sensory experiences that don't automatically have like thoughts and intellect and rationality applied to them, and tuning in and developing a greater level of sensitivity to those things, because that's what it is to really interact with the mystery. The same thing is true for interacting with the unconscious mind. You know, to be able to find ways to tap into that deeper, let's say, unconscious like element of yourself also helps you sort of wade into the mystery. With the animus, it's all about practicing crystallizing and making sense of those mysteries, to be able to describe your sensory experiences, being able to describe what comes up in your inner world when you're interacting with the unconscious. And so basically with those dynamics, that's kind of how those go together. And so my recommendations are all based around that. All right, so that's all I have for you for now. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead, leave me a comment down below. Go ahead, leave me a like, subscribe. Also, if you are interested in meeting with me on a discovery call to see if my program Shadow Work for Self-Sabotage is a good fit for you, go ahead and click the link down below in the description. Also, if you would like to learn more about shadow work and the anima and the animus, go ahead and click this link right here. And until next time, keep becoming more you.